Hello, friends. Well, listen, you know what I want to talk about, and I've been meaning to, and then somebody sent me a message. I was like, oh my God, I forgot. I wanted to mention this. You know, this image that's been circulating for years, basically. There's two images, right? So there's one when you're talking about diversity and inclusion, and it's the image that talks about the difference between equity and equality. So, it's like the three brown boys, one they're overlooking a pitch with the fence. You know the one, right? So one stood on like one book, one stood on like two books and something else, and the other one stood on, I'm going to try and find it. So, and the other one stood up on like three, and they're peering over the fence, and it's like, equality is this and equity is that, right? There's also this other phrase, and I tell you what, like, before all of this, I used to sit on panels for diversity, inclusion, leadership, you name it, right? And every time diversity and inclusion came on, there was always somebody that would quote this quote that, like inside I'll be like, oh God. But the audience laps it up. It's like the sound bite. Do you know what I mean? So it's this one, you know it. I am going to find a picture, so, because there's like a new version of it now. So it's like diversity is being asked to dance. Inclusion is, no, what is it? Sorry, no, look, it's so rubbish I can't even remember. Diversity is being invited to the party, right? Inclusion is being asked to dance. I feel like I should perform this in like mime or song or something. So inclusion is being asked to dance, and then belonging is dancing like nobody's watching. So you see what I want to say about this now? I've got so much cussing. Look, I've pulled out the thing out of my hair. I've got so much cussing to say about this. Look. So it's in the audience, somebody's like, like, what is the difference between diversity and inclusion and belonging? And somebody will come out with this soundbite, and the audience are lapping it up. Oh my God. And I'm sat there like. So in this space, if you're going to talk about being anti-racist, if you are going to do something specific, and when I say specific, I mean that as a business, you've moved away from talking about diversity and inclusion as a euphemism for addressing systemic racism and the barriers that Black people face within organisations, right? And this is a key point because some organisations still can't bring themselves to say the word black. They're still struggling. If you're still in a space of your way of addressing this is to go, yes, I know we've got to do something about, like Black Lives Matter and the movement and. So, let's brush off our approach to diversity and inclusion and carry on leading with that. You've got more work to do because this issue about Black people and the struggles that we face, the barriers that we face, the racism, the prejudice, the discrimination, the stereotypes that we fall victim to, which affect our ability to progress within an organisation, is not about diversity and inclusion. It's not about that. Do you know what I mean? Because remember, diversity is literally, before I even get into my issues already with this, but in that context, diversity is about how many people who are non-white, non-straight, disabled, da, 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 da. So diversity and inclusion has been used as a way to get in other people who aren't deemed as normal, as acceptable into organisations. Whether people were aware of that or not, that is fundamentally what diversity and inclusion was all about. The fact that you still have to wrap, diversifying your workforce, just, from a fairness point of view around special initiatives, and you have to put business cases to be approved by predominantly white men in senior leadership teams, is part and parcel of why we're here today. So if you're going to address this issue about Black people and your Black colleagues, your Black employees, you cannot still use this framework of diversity and inclusion, and you cannot dust it off and shine a new light on it because you think like this is the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't do that because it's not going to solve anything. And if you're still unable to specifically address your Black colleagues, if you're still unable to come up with a plan of action that is fundamentally going to make a difference over a period of time for Black people currently in your organisation, but those who may come, then you've still got more work to do. It doesn't matter how many pages long your diversity and inclusion PowerPoint is. You can't use that as a euphemism to address this. So that's kind of my side point around that, because like that is still going on. Like, you know, some people are still contacting me to talk about diversity and inclusion. And do you know what? I go back to them and say, are you talking about diversity and inclusion? Or are you talking about anti-racism or black or blah, 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 blah? If they say to me, we want to talk to you about diversity and inclusion in the broadest sense, well, I'm not the person for you. So do you know what? In a nice way, I'm not like rude about it, but I'm just saying, look, I can't help you with that because that's not my jam. You know what I mean? This is about black people, and it's about anti-racism, and it's about equality. And the other thing I want to say is also about fundamental human rights, because you know that kind of gets lost in everyone's like opinions about whether or not it's fair that we're putting the spotlight on black people. Fundamentally, everyone on this planet has the right to be treated equally. Do you know what I mean? Has the right. As black people, we do not have that right now. So no, this is not a diversity and inclusion initiative. It is about inclusion in terms of making us feel welcome and eradicating the barriers and the systemic, you know, policies and ways of working, etc. But fundamentally, when I talk about it, I'm like, this is a fundamental human rights issue. That's my angle, not diversity and inclusion. This is a human rights issue. So when you bear that in mind, and you bear in mind being specific, you bear in mind not dressing this up as like some kind of souped up D&I just because there's a moment right now. So you've moved on from that. And you want to talk about black people. The issue with this whole, it's like romanticising the challenges that we face, this whole thing about, oh, it's being asked to dance. And do you know what else and this is what I went back to this lovely lady who's got sense. Do you know what I mean? She's got sense to be like, my colleagues are sharing this and I'm not feeling comfortable. And I'm like, you're right not to feel comfortable. Let me tell you why. And it's because that whole premise and that whole saying implies that we can only be invited to dance by the majority. So we are not equal enough to be in the bloody room in the first place. That's what that implies. That's why I don't like that. Do you know what I mean? And this whole thing about, you know, and then you can dance, and it's an example of where we've tried to simplify things to get it across the line, but have completely missed the bloody point. So the reason why I'm saying this is one, clearly it's not, and before somebody says like, oh, it's just an analogy to use for dancing, it's more than that. Break it down and deconstruct it and say, what is it fundamentally? Before everyone starts clapping and thinking it's the best soundbite since, do you know what I mean? It's like, deconstruct it and work out what is it that it's saying. It is saying, unless you are the majority, you have to wait to be invited in. You've got to wait to be invited into the organisation. You've got to wait for the organisation to sort itself out in terms of putting in the practices in place to make sure that when you can get in the first place, and then when you're in, you'll be treated like everybody else. That whole position, that whole phrase is the epitome for me of white supremacy, because it is putting the majority white people in that position of like, you know, like in, you know, like the 18th century when they used to have like this historical reference, but when they used to have you know, like balls and stuff for all of the debutantes and all the rest of it. So in my mind, I have this visual of this great big, you know, ballroom with all of these, you know, well-to-do people sitting around on the edges and, you know, deciding or not whether they are going to bestow the, you know, the opportunity for lesser individuals over there who were like peering, like those brown boys are peering over the fence, or like these other people that are waiting for the invite to the dance floor and then they want to spin around like nobody's watching. I'm like, listen. Do you know what I mean? So like, it's good that she said like, Shereen, can I just, and clearly she caught me at a good moment because I was like, boop, 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 this is stuff. But fundamentally, this goes back to, we cannot romanticize this issue and use these ridiculous phrases and these same dry biscuit graphics. Like people going, oh my God, yeah, I so get it now, I so get it. No, because that does not solve structural racism. That does not solve systemic inequalities. So I get really annoyed when I see this. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if you have any of these images, and I hope, let's see if my like video editing skills do really well, right? Because I'm going to see if I can like, have it spinning in or something. If any of your PowerPoint presentations, any of your business cases around Black Lives Matter, anti-racism, or anything like that, if you have any of these ridiculous images to prove a point, just take it off. Honestly, like just take it off. Because if you're still using it, because some people go, yeah, but I think it's a good analogy as a starting point. No, it is not a good analogy as a starting point. break it down for people, the historical context about how we got here. We don't need to use analogies, yet let's use history and base some analogies off of that realness, not off this image of these sodding boys looking over the fence, and not over this other one of, you know, diversity, be invited to a dance and spinning around like nobody's watching and all of that stuff. Let's just do away with all of that, because all that is doing is softening and distracting from what are the core issues, and it kids people. So everyone looks at that graph and go, yeah, this is exactly what we need to do, and it solves nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like,